Hello again, welcome to the Warrington Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now, before we get into today's video, I'd like to say a huge thank you to Ryan Hager for sending in some awesome pictures of his Armageddon Steel Legion. I especially like the Baneblade, the Fortress of Arrogance. It looks absolutely fantastic, and I also really like that converted officer with the bolt pistol and power fist. As someone who has to work with metal models, I appreciate how much effort it can take to convert those old metal minis up, and I have to say, Ryan, you've done an absolutely fantastic job. You've done the Steel Legion proud. If anyone else has got any cool pictures they want me to use in my videos, please post on my Facebook page. There will be a link down in the description below. Now, we also have another little bit of channel admin. For those of you that follow me on Facebook, you'll know that the Patreon giveaway this month is a tank, Lemurus battle tank, and a Knight Commander Pask upgrade for that battle tank. So you can use that as any tank commander if you're not Caden, or you can use that giveaway to create Knight Commander Pask. For those of you that are not sure how to enter the Patreon giveaway, it's very simple. You go on my Patreon page. Again, there'll be a link down in the description below, and all you need to do is sign up. There's no minimum. If you sign up for $1, that's absolutely fine. If you sign up for $10, that's amazing. Thank you. No matter what the size of your pledge, if you enter, you'll be in with a chance of winning the giveaway. And no matter where you are in the world, I will make sure that you get your prize. So yeah, that's it. And of course, you are absolutely free to sign up, do your first pledge, and then if you don't win, you can always, you can always remove your pledge after if you want. That's absolutely fine if you want to do that. Although, of course, I would really appreciate it if you could keep your support, ongoing. It does, the Patreons really have made all the difference to this channel. The new recording software and camera and Great Mordian Restoration Project and other armies have all been funded directly through the Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would be nothing, honestly. The ability for me to attend tournaments, all that kind of stuff. All the money I get from Patreon just goes directly back into the channel. And I use that money to make sure that I'm staying on the cutting edge, being able to keep my tactics up to date, and being able to deliver good displays of tactics as well in the battle reports. So I know I'm waffling on a little bit, but the Patreon supporters really truly are the lifeblood of this channel. So it's my way of giving back to those guys by doing a little giveaway every month. And this month, like I said, it's a Lemurus battle tank and Knight Commander Pask. So I hope lots of people will sign up. The draw for that giveaway is going to be, I announced it on Facebook at the beginning of the month. I will do the draw itself at the end of the first week of September, so that I actually go away on holiday, but around that time. But I should do the draw no later than Saturday the 7th. So if you want to be with a chance of winning, please make sure you sign up before then. In fact, I'll probably do the announcement on around the 5th or 6th. So please keep your eyes open then. If you want to be with a chance of winning, please sign up for Patreon before that time. So 3 minutes into the video, and we've not talked about what we want to talk about today. So let's cut the chit chat, cut the waffle, and let's get down to business. So we're going to be talking about pure infantry guard tactics, people. Now, I know I talk about, pure infantry is the most powerful guard sort of type army out there at the moment, and it's becoming more and more powerful again. And so I appreciate that I say a lot of sort of generalizations and sweeping statements, but what are some really guiding principles? What are some quite not high level tactics, but in-depth tactics for using a pure infantry army? We're talking real world tactics about how do you organize your men, how do you move them around the battlefield quickly, how do you transport them quickly, with that kind of tactics, all the way to actual individual in-game tactics like conga lining, for example, and merging squads and stuff like that. There's a whole lot of depth to a pure infantry army. It is a blunt tool, but it is a very effective blunt tool, but does have to be used well, has to be used by a good commander, because if you're not ready for the challenge of using a pure infantry army, it can be very overwhelming, and it can be very easy to get flustered, overwhelmed, and your games can fall apart. So I thought, let's actually do some proper in-depth 8th edition tactics. Okay, I've been doing loads of hybrid tactics in 8th edition for years now, literally 3 years now. It's time to get back to the roots of this channel, along with the Great Mordian Restoration Project. It's time to do the Great Mordian Tactical Restoration Project as well. So we're really getting into some pure infantry tactics today. Now, one of those, and sort of things to be aware of, tips and tricks, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to be doing a big focus on that over the next week or so. Okay. Now, let's go through one of the guiding, one of the biggest things you have to be aware of when collecting and playing, specifically playing a pure infantry guard army. It's something you have to be. It's a double-edged sword, and it's called force concentration. Okay. Now it's quite jarring coming from an elite army, or even a more elite Imperial Guard army, to a pure dedicated horde one. And one of the first problems that commanders will encounter when trying to implement pure infantry tactics is a problem of force concentration. You see, because you have so many units, typically in a pure infantry army you will be looking at 200 infantry minimum. Realistically, you're going to be looking at 250. It's not, that would be the minimum level, well, the medium level I should say, and it's not uncommon. In fact, pre-conscript nerf, it was encouraged to be looking at a 300 guardsman army, 270 to 300 guardsman army. So you do have lots and lots of men. However, the problem is those units typically are individually quite weak, and so what happens is you end up having a very long, spread out line. You essentially fill your deployment zone. You absolutely fill it chock full of guys, and so you're able to cover a really large area. But the problem is that an enemy force will have much greater force concentration than you, because an enemy force will only have enough units to really dominate a single flank. They might be able to move all over the board, but typically they're going to have the ability to dominate one area of the field at once, whereas your guards have the ability to put pressure everywhere, but not to the same level as more elite army. That's how elite armies function. They bring a lot of firepower to a small place on the board, whereas pure infantry horde armies tend to bring a medium amount of firepower, but to everywhere at once. So you have to be aware of this, and you have to use it to your advantage. Okay, what a good enemy commander will do when facing a pure infantry army is to use the advantage of force concentration. He will strike one area extremely hard, and he'll win on one flank. Essentially, he'll win that sort of third of the battle. And what you'll find is then your remaining forces will be out of position. And your guys are if your right flank is collapsing, your guys on your left flank almost feel like they're out of the battle. They can't contribute as well. They're going to have to struggle to react. The way you get round this is you have to remember a couple of things. Now, obviously, the new Space Marine Codex sort of gets around this, but typically enemy reserves will be coming in from turn 2 onwards, which means your first turn is very, very important for making the enemy react to you. And now what you want to do is to get as much space as possible. and you want to use your I don't know what to call it, but breadth of forces. You want to use those to put pressure across the enemy's entire position. Okay, because you know the enemy is going to want to concentrate in one place. You know that's what your enemy's advantage is, and you want to try and force your opponent to be stuck between a rock and a hard place. You want to try and force your opponent to decide whether to try and counter you across the whole front, in which case he'll spread himself too thinly, or you want to try and force your opponent to, or does your opponent concentrate all in one area, in which case he's ceding a lot of territory to you, and board control wins games. So it can be a very difficult position to put your opponent in, but the key to pulling this tactic off, and the key to turning force almost dilution to your advantage, and to have breadth of force an advantage over force concentration, is by being aggressive and making sure you gain the early battle momentum. So what you want to be doing is advancing, putting pressure on, really getting into your opponent's grill, really getting into his face, taking as much board control as possible, and threatening as many objectives as possible. Even in a Maelstrom game, your opponent is going to be very reluctant, even if he's not drawing any sort of secure objective 1 cards or defend objective 2 cards. Even if he doesn't draw those straight away, your opponent's going to be very reluctant to let you suddenly secure all the objective points in the battlefield. And especially in Maelstrom, if your opponent starts drawing cards which are secure objective 1, secure objective 2, and they're ones that are under your control and away from his main force, it's going to make him spread out. And if your opponent doesn't keep his force concentration, then you will win. It's as simple as that. And this whole tactic is based upon an old line in the Tactica Imperialis, which I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but it goes something along the lines of, if you have superior numbers, deploy along a wide front. When your opponent spreads himself too thinly, you will find gaps in his formations, and you must send your reserves into those gaps, push through, split them open, break them apart, and shatter your enemy's front lines. And it's obviously probably something that Sun Tzu said in The Art of War as well, and it's in the Tactica Imperialis. So, and it's very true, and that is essentially, as a Horde Guard commander, that is what you're trying to do. You need to try and stop your opponent from successfully bringing force concentration to bear. And it is very possible to do. Another way of looking at it, typically what I tend to find happens, is you almost get the horns of the buffalo. Now, if anyone has seen the film Zulu, you'll know what I'm talking about, where the main body of your army will clash with the main body of their army, and this is the head of the buffalo, the two heads bashing against each other. However, our buffalo has horns, and that's the flanks, and that's where your remaining forces will eventually, whilst the enemy is pinned fighting your main bulk of your forces, your remaining armies will go around the sides, cut the enemy off, and start killing them. And that's essentially what you want to try and do, and it does work. I do it all the time. There's a battle report coming up, which will hopefully be published on Monday, where you can see this happening with my Mordian Iron Guard, 300 Mordian Iron Guard, facing against the Dark Elder, Johnny's Dark Elder. I'm not going to say who wins, I'm not going to say whether the tactic works or not, but you see, the Dark Elder, they've got great force concentration, and they're able to overwhelm a flank very easily. But whilst they're busy concentrating on one flank, the centre of the guard and the other flank of the guard are able to start pushing through and start threatening the Dark Elder on a wider scale. And there's nothing, the Dark Elder have to try. It's a game of cat and mouse, where the Dark Elder essentially jumping from flank to flank, trying to stop the advance of the guard. You have to watch to find out whether they're successful or not. But that way, if you see the enemy is forced to react to you, and if the enemy is being reactionary, that's very bad for them. Because in 40k, he who has the momentum, he who is being proactive and is dictating the flow of the battle generally wins. And the way you do that is by having momentum. And in a horde guard army, pure infantry army, the way you do that is by taking advantage of your breadth of forces. Not necessarily depth of force, but breadth, width, length, whatever you want to call it. That's how you take advantage. And you, like I said, you essentially attack on an extended front. And where the enemy begins to show, weakness, you'll push through. How this will, now that's all very good theory crafting, but how you will tend to find this actually practically plays out is for the first turn, 2 turns, possibly 3 turns, but definitely by the 3rd turn you'll start seeing it swing back towards you. The first couple of turns the enemy will tend to look like they're winning. They'll be doing significant damage to you, they'll be checking your advances left, right and centre. And then the 3rd turn comes along and the enemy's forces begin to get weak. And suddenly they're not able, their reserves have probably been committed turn 2. Maybe turn 3, but typically they've had to commit them turn 2 to hold back the tide. Once you've overwhelmed the reserves, if they have any, then you'll find suddenly turn 3 the enemy will collapse or crack, and turn 4 and turn 5 the enemy will go into wholesale collapse, and you'll find your army just pouring forth onto all the objectives. And and literally the way you want to be implementing this tactically, on the offensive, in-depth tactics, how do you want to be doing this? Well, how I organise it is I take 3 battalions, and I tend to organise, 3 battalions. I take 60 infantry in each one of those, and of those 60, not 6, so that's 180 infantry. And what I will tend to do is take 50 infantry from each battalion. And just 50 infantry are marching down the left, 50 infantry are marching down the centre, 50 infantry are marching down the right, and that's the enemy. That's 50 infantry on the offensive, and then the remaining 30 infantry plus command squads, heavy weapons, veterans, fire support elements. They're staying back and they're being my 2nd and 3rd lines. But my enemy, I literally go, there's an objective on that side of the board, I'm putting 50 infantry on it. If we're playing a mission like multi-ball, for example, I know there's 4 objectives, 5. I know there's 5 objectives, on the field. I'll use my backline forces to defend my 2. There's 3 other objectives there. 1 on the left, 2 of my enemy's deployments, and 1 in the centre. I will send 50 infantry at each one of those. My opponent has to try and stop me. If we're playing the 4 pillars, I know I will defend 2 of my own objectives, and then I will send, 75 infantry, roughly 70, 80 infantry at each one of my opponent's objectives, and I will take them, because it's very difficult for your opponent to stop all those infantry. And if he doesn't concentrate on them, then he's concentrating on your backline units, then you get the objectives. If he concentrates on the advancing units, then the backline units start inflicting heavy casualties to him. If you're playing a mission like Beachhead, you can literally, Beachhead is won and lost on that central objective. It's very much the case of you defend your own objective with a third of your forces, and then you send 150 guys onto that central objective. You dogpile it and you don't let it go, and it's almost impossible for the enemy to shift you off. Things like the relic, scouring, all these missions, you put armies into groups of, you put your force into groups of 30, 40, 50 guys, maybe 60 if there's only a few objectives, and you just go like battering rams. You just ram 50 infantry down one flank, 50 infantry down another. And your opponent may stop 2 advances. Your opponent may defeat the left flank and almost completely wipe those guys out. He may stall the middle flank and it becomes a deadly stalemate. But you will find on that final remaining flank, your opponent doesn't quite have enough to stop you, and he may even completely cede that territory to you. But what you've got to essentially, what I like to do, and what I've begun implementing in my tactics now, is using lots of regular infantry to push across the wide front. And then where I start breaking through, one thing I've started doing is taking cheap squads of like big 10-man cheap squads of things like Scions. And where I start winning, I don't send my reserves in to shore up a stalling attack. I send my reserves in to capitalize on a breakthrough. You know, when the enemy thinks that they've just managed, you know, when the enemy thinks they've got just enough to stop that breakthrough, and suddenly 30 Scions turn up, with the, you know, that can swing the tide in your favour. That can swing the tide in your favour. But I think that'll be another video, how to use reserves in a horde army. I think that will be a video, because I don't just use Scions. You can use things like Talan as well. You start ambushing things. The Dagger of Tusaka is very potent as well. So we'll cover those reserves in the next video. What kind of reserves should you be taking, and how should you be using them? So we'll cover that in the next video. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Hope you found it useful. Please let me know what you think down in the comments below. And if there's anything about pure infantry tactics that you want answering, any questions you want answering, any video topics you think are important, please let me know. Because I obviously know a lot about pure infantry tactics, but I may not necessarily think it's, you know, I may think, oh, that's obvious. But if you know, it's good for me to keep my finger on the pulse and you know, get an idea of what you guys want from me. So let me know down in the comments below what you think I should cover next about pure infantry tactics. All right, hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and of course, I'll see you guys next time.